Afternoon YouTube, I'm Chucky2009, and some of my longer term viewers remember several years ago now when I built these heavy duty jack stands, and I really like these things. You know, I set out because I was never too thrilled about climbing underneath a vehicle supported by like 14 gauge sheet metal at most, and so I decided I was going to build my own, and that's exactly what I did. Even with that, it's maybe this high off the ground, and as anyone who's ever worked on a lifted truck or perhaps a tractor or larger vehicle can tell you, that's just not really going to work too well. In fact, that's the issue we had last summer doing the axle swap under that flatbed trailer. We had to block these up on like 4 big chunks of wood. So I really need some taller jack stands, and that's what we're going to build today. So first things first, let's work on building this section right here. I've decided I want to build this out of 1/4 inch steel just like this, but we're going to weld it together because I want a larger size that I don't happen to have on hand, and I've got a fair amount of 1/4 inch plate drops. So we're just going to cut out 4 sides and we'll put some holes in them and weld them together. So let's get started. So overall, I'm very happy with the way this project turned out. I really like these jack stands. I was out here messing around with them earlier. The only thing is, these were very labor intensive to build, and most of that's my fault for being cheap and wanting to use, other than the pins, only material that we already had on hand. So the way I built the jack stands a couple years ago was to take some regular 2-inch square tube, which is this stuff here. This is the same stuff you buy in like 20-foot sticks at a steel yard, and I took some 2-inch receiver tube, which is different. This is not like 2-inch or 2.5-inch 3/16 wall, so regular 2-inch square tube fits inside it. This is like hitch receiver stuff. Like if you're gonna build a hitch for someone's truck and you gotta buy the tube, this is what you get. This is purpose built, there's no inside seam, etc. The downside is it's fairly expensive and only available in the 2-inch size. I thought it'd be kind of cool to have 3-inch, and I had a fair amount of 1/4 inch plate drops laying around. So instead of doing it the easy way, I cut out 4 flat pieces here and welded them together here, here, and here. And then instead of just spending like 12 bucks on one of these at any place that sells trailer parts, I took 4 sides and welded them like all the way out. Now luckily we did this with gas shielded flux core, which is, I'm not going to say it's the fastest deposition rate out there period, because like subarc for instance is quite a bit higher, but of the common processes that the average person who's fairly serious about welding can do in their own shop with equipment they probably already have, it's about as fast as it gets. That 2400 can put out a serious amount of power, and with that wire we had a pretty good travel speed on this. If I had to stick weld all this, I'd still be doing it. So if someone out there wants to build these at their own risk, of course, you might be smarter than I am if you just go out and buy some 2-inch square stock and a receiver tube or two, but you know, that's a decision for you to make. Anyway, we have these, and one thing I really like about them above all else, basically the main reason I built them, is for their adjustability. So I'm about 6'2", 6'3" or so, and this jack stand will come up almost exactly to my belt line, just a little bit below, and this is at maximum height. Now I know what you're thinking, why would anyone ever need anything that size? Well, you know, if you're working on a trailer or something like my 20-foot flatbed trailer, I think its frame rails are naturally about here or so. So if I want to jack it up enough to take the wheels off the ground, you know, it's going to be up close to this high. And then like my dump truck in there working on that, you know, its frame rails normally are like this high, and this high doesn't look like much on this jack stand, luckily, because I made them really tall, of course. But on a normal, like, flimsy store-bought jack stand, you know, it's this tall naturally, this tall maxed out. And to get something up this high, you have to prop it up on like super sketchy wood blocks and hope it doesn't fall and kill you and whatnot. So that's the main reason I built these. The other thing is, and this was a little bit of an unintended side effect, since these are very tall, I wanted them to have a nice firm wide base, and a positive unintended side effect of that is these are very, very stable if you have to use them on gravel or something. I mean, I'm pushing on this pretty hard, and they don't really slide around. One side doesn't sink. If you push on it about as hard as you can, the only thing that happens is that it'll eventually start to rock up a little bit. But I mean, these are incredibly stable. Obviously, we all know that you're really better off if you can use jack stands on a hard surface like a hard concrete shop floor. But if I absolutely had to work on something out here or in dirt or mud, for instance, I'd feel a lot safer doing it with these jack stands than with your average ones that don't even have a base. So that's the advantage of the 14-inch base plates. And the other thing is I can set these to go really low as well without a pin even being in there. Basically knee height for me. So I mean, that's a pretty good range of adjustability if you work on trucks and larger vehicles and trailers and occasionally farm equipment. So yeah, and then I just run the pin through. Evidently it did a fairly decent job of it. Now, one downside to these jack stands is they're really friggin' heavy. Now, this shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone because, I mean, look at how big they are, and they're all 1/4-inch plate. But where I'm going with this is, while I was building these, I gave serious thought to putting a handle like between two of these gussets. And then I realized if you're gonna move these, it really requires gloves and two full hands. You can't just like grab one in each hand and carry them around with you. So the handles seem kind of pointless. But if anybody out there, at their own risk, of course, completely at their own risk, wants to build smaller versions of these, then maybe you might want to consider adding on a handle. And the other thing is, I have these pin handles, which kind of work as a handle. I'm going to say that's probably about 90 pounds or so. I'm going to say this is somewhere between 80 and 90 pounds. And like I said, it really requires two hands and all your strength and concentration to move these. You can't just grab a couple of at a time with some other tools and make it work.